Hello, fellows. Once again, you are welcome to this channel. The name is Dennis Quansah, a fellow at Education Interventionist. Today, we are going to continue our lesson on figures of speech, and our focus will be on anaphora, paradox, and paralipsis. Let's start with anaphora. Anaphora is the technique where several phrases or verses begin with the same word or words. Let's look at the examples below. I came, I saw, I conquered. Now, if you look at the phrases, I runs through all. I came, I saw, I conquered. Let's look at the second example, the repetition of mad. So, mad word, mad kings, mad composition. In the third example, we shall has been repeated and is beginning all the phrases. We shall not flag or fail. We shall not go on to the end. We shall never surrender. Another classic example of anaphora is in the Holy Book, that is the Bible. And that can be found in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. The repetition of time. So he says that to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. And it goes on and on. The repetition of time. So that is what we call anaphora. Let's proceed to paradox. A paradox is a seemingly absurd or contradictory statement, which when investigated may prove to be well-founded or true. So paradox, basically, this is a statement that when you look at it on the surface, it doesn't make sense. However, when you probe further, there's an element of truth in it. Let's look at the first example from George Orwell's Animals. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Now, how can all animals be equal? However, some are equal than others. It doesn't make sense on the surface. George Orwell was making a political statement that even though the politicians claim that we are all equal before the law and we are all equal, if you go further and you go deeper, you realize that we are all not actually equal. Some are treated differently from the others. Let's get a second example. That thou shalt die. In John Donne's Death Be Not Proud, he made a statement like, death thou shalt die. Now, the question is, how can death die? Now, if you look at it on the surface, it doesn't make sense. However, John was making reference to the fact that in the Holy Book, when we die, after death, there will be judgment. And those who did evil will perish. So he just makes that death after judgment will also die. So death should not be proud. And the last example, your best friend is your worst enemy. Now you ask yourself, how can your best friend be your worst enemy? But if you think deeper, there's an element of truth in it. Your best friend knows all your secrets and knows everything about you. So if your best friend betrays you, it is a betrayal indeed. Let's move on to the last, and that is paralipsis. It is a technique of drawing attention to something by claiming not to mention it. The first example, we will not speak of all Quaker's peculiarities here, how he eschewed for coffee and hot rolls, and apply his undivided attention to beefsteaks. This is in Melville's Moby Dick. we shall not speak of. However, the speaker ended up saying everything. Look at the second example. I don't want to tell you that Kathy hid your shoes under the bed. He indicated that I don't want to talk about it. However, he ended up mentioning it. Third example. The music, the service at the feast, the noble gifts for the great and small, the rich adornment of Theseus' palace. All these things I do not mention now. See, all these things I do not mention now, but the writer had already mentioned them. And the last example, it looks like you spent a lot of money today, not to mention that you borrowed 40 cedis from me yesterday. Not to mention that you borrowed 40 cedis from me yesterday. The writer had already mentioned that someone borrowed 40 cedis from him or her yesterday. So we've come to the end of the lesson. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Don't forget to send us your comments and also subscribe. Stay safe.